What is going on, all you Pokemon collecting maniacs out there? This is Ryan, the PikaPikaPaPa, and this is absolutely, hands down, without questions, my favorite video series that we do here on the PikaPikaPaPa channel. And that is because, in my mind, listen, when you're thinking about prices, right? Prices are going to go up, prices are going to come down. There's no linear upward and the right trajectory. So whenever we're in the middle of a market cycle like we're in right now, it's getting a little bit softer. I love this video because what I'm looking for is just overall engagement in the hobby, right? So in this video, we're going to look at the 4 big grading companies, and we're going to look at the actual number of cards that they graded in the month of September, specifically in the TCG space. Now, I talk about this all the time. This is like hobby level, macro level type of information that we can use because, again, what I want to see is I want to see the excitement. I want to see people engaged. Like, I want to see people grading cards because at the end of the day, to me, I think that's the best indicator that people are in this for the long run. Now, I do think that there's probably 40% of people who are getting cards graded and they're keeping them in their personal collection, or they understand like that's the best way to grow the net value of their collection is to get them graded. And I do think that there's probably 60% of people who are just grading cards to go ahead and sell them on the secondary market. But guess what? That's okay, because people who are grading in mass, like, you don't grade in mass to sell unless you think that there is a market with open arms to go ahead and accept those cards that you've had graded. And that is why in this video, every month, I get so excited. That's why it's my favorite video, because I always want to see, is the hobby growing in the grading space? Is it retracting, or what is going on? And this video has got all kinds of awesome information just like that in it. Now, as I said, we do this video every single month. So if that gets you excited, we have an amazing community here in the PikaPikaPapa space. If you hadn't hit that subscribe button yet, we would love it if you did it. If you like what you see, give us a thumbs up. Questions or comments, drop them down below. Those 3 small things go a long way in helping my small channel out. Lets me know you appreciate the work that I put in. So without further ado, let's get into this rip-roaring grading video right here. So now I start off with that big, bold thing, similar trends. And there's a couple reasons for that. First off, PSA is obviously like, that's the barometer in the hobby. Like, you look at the graph on the left, you have the PSA cards graded by month, and then they're there at the very, very bottom in lines you can't even see because the numbers are so small compared to PSA. You have all the other grading companies. Now, similar trends is PSA had a record month last month. It was the highest number of cards that PSA had ever graded in a single month, and they are pretty much flat this month. But the other thing that I noticed is if you look at the graph in the middle, you will see that the other grading companies, they all kind of tail down a little bit. So that tells me, hey, overall in the hobby, they're all seeing the same thing. PSA is flat to down just a little bit, like SGC is down, CGC is down a little bit. Beckett has a little bit of a sharper downturn. But what was really interesting to me is if you look over in the far right there, PSA, even though they're flat, they're up 8% month over month in the TCG space, right? Like, that's exciting to me. That means that even though the TCG space is growing, the other segments must be retracting at a higher rate if PSA is flat month over month, right? So for me, that just goes to show me, and that goes to bolster what I was talking about earlier in this video, is that I feel like a lot of people are still excited about the hobby right now. The hobby is growing. Then you look at CGC cards right there. So CGC dropped. They were also down in the TCG space 2%. Then you look at Beckett, we talked about it. Beckett had a not great month there, obviously dropping off pretty sharply with a 16% retraction in the TCG space. But then SGC saw a huge jump month over month in TCG. It was up 53%. That is absolutely huge. So when you think about it, look at the SGC graph there at the very top right of the middle one. You'll see that overall SGC is down, but the fact that their TCG space was up 53% when the overall company was down, that just goes to show you like how strong of a presence they're starting to build in the TCG space. Now listen to me, I'm a PSA guy. I'm always going to be a PSA guy. I tell you every single month I am pulling for one of these other companies to come out of left field and challenge PSA. I think all markets do better when we have an A and a B, and right now it's PSA and just nobody else is challenging them. But we shall see. But right now certainly is a one-horse race when we're looking at overall gradings by company. Now here we're going to look at the most graded sets at PSA in the TCG space. And one thing I wanted to call out is V-Star Universe remains the #1 most graded set, and it has been in that position for 6 months. I have looked at these, even before the PikaPikaPaPa channel existed, I always looked at these every single month from gemrate.com. First off, they're awesome people there, but second off, this is really cool data. I have never seen a set in the #1 spot for 6 consecutive months. So I start to ask myself, like, how much of this product being graded is too much? I don't know. I've told you I'm a big fan of the Japanese cards. I think they're beautiful. I think they're awesome. I just haven't been collecting a ton of them. But then when you look at this, Japanese has 8 of the 10 top spots again. We saw this last month. We see it again. It is absolutely driven by Japanese cards when we look at the most graded sets. Japanese 151 climbed up to number 2. I don't think it'll be long before we see the English version of that. Usually it takes a couple months to jump up there. And then again, Crown Zenith and the 1999 Pokemon game are the only English cards that are represented on here. I think it's really cool that V-Star Universe is up there on the Japanese side of things. We got Crown Zenith up here, and you know how excited I get when I see the Origin set 1999 on here. Now I will say this, they don't break this out, so that 1999 includes base set, you know, it includes Shadowless, it includes first edition, everything from that 1999 set is lumped in there, but it is still really, really cool to see that there is so much grading volume going on in that English Origin set that is still on this list. It's on this list almost all the time. So really cool to take a look at all of that. Now we're going to get into the most graded cards. So these are individual cards. Which ones were graded the most last month? And obviously you can see we have these different columns on here. We also have on the far right hand side, it will show you the gem rate, and we'll talk about that here in a minute because that is really interesting for us to look at. Now, as no surprise, every single month we see that Ultra Modern rules this list. It is fascinating to me. I keep waiting to see something from the 1999 Pokemon game or some of the earlier sets of Pokemon jump up on here, but every single time we look at this, it is always 2022, 2023, which I guess makes the most sense. People are ripping and sending it in, so not a big surprise. I'm just kind of always a fan of the older sets, so I'm always looking for one to come out on top. Now, we do have three set cards from V-Star Universe that are on here. Another thing is we saw a bunch of trainers on this list over in the months past. We saw 3-4 different trainers on here. Very interesting to see the number of trainers that are starting to fall off. Now, we know the full art trainers was a really hot space here for a long time. Now, this is not enough information for us to say it's cooling off, but it is something to note that we don't have as many full art trainers on here as we have had on in the past. Now, you know how much I love that Magikarp card, so you know I was going to call out the fact that that Japanese version is one of the most graded cards here on the list, and obviously PikaPikaPapa. Love me some Pikachu. Love the fact that we got 2 Pikachus on here. Now, when I said we were talking about gem rate, this is what I'm talking about right here. I say this every single month, and we can pontificate about why it happens or what it means or the timing of everything, but here is an undeniable statistical fact after doing this video for, I don't know, well over a year now on the PikiPikaPapa channel. I have highlighted the all-time gem rate on the far right and the September gem rate right there in yellow, okay? Every single time we look at this, the September gem rate, or whatever month we're coming out of, on average is much lower than the all-time gem rate. This time, 9 out of 10 September gem rates are lower than the all-time gem rate, and the only one that's not lower is actually flat. Again, I don't know the reason behind it. We can speculate, we can talk about it, it's fun, I get it, but the reality is this: it is a statistical fact that whatever reason, the older the card is, the longer it takes, the gem rate goes down, and that is why I say, hey, as soon as you get a card in your hot little hands, if you have the money, if you want to get it graded, send it away, get it graded, because the numbers don't lie. For whatever reason, the earlier you get it there, the gem rate always starts off a little bit higher. So something interesting we talk about a lot on this channel. Now, this is what I was talking about when I'm saying I want to see the excitement, I want to see the popularity, I want to see TCG cards just stomp the heck out of every other category at PSA. And guess what? That is exactly what we see this month. Look at this. So you see the categories there. TCG was up 8%. Guess what? Baseball was down 6%. Football was down 15%. Basketball down 8%, and TCG made up 48% of all of the cards that were graded at PSA last month, which is just absolutely crazy. The other thing that I keep track of, and you see it here on the left, is I add up the 3 major ball sports: baseball, basketball, football, because when I started this channel all those moons ago, I said, hey, listen, I think TCG is going to take over the ball sports space. And you'll see that the percentage of TCG to ball sports has been climbing since we started looking at this in December of last year. It went from 81% to 70 to 94 to 86. Yada, yada, yada. The last 3 months, this month it was at 111%. Last month it was at 93%. The month before it was at 122%. So lots of good news, lots of excitement. We love to see people transition from ball sports over to TCG, because in the long run, the more people that are in this hobby, the better it is for you and me as we are collecting and getting these cards together for some great future price appreciation. Now, the next thing that we're going to look at right here is the most graded subject. So this is the third month in a row where Charizard has come in second place. And 3 months ago, I said I'd never seen it before. And I told you, I've been looking at this list for a long, long time. Charizard has always been number one. So the fact that Pikachu has leapfrogged Charizard and has not only done that, but has stayed there 3 months in a row is big, big news to me. The other thing that I love, look, Magikarp made the list for the first time ever. Obviously, we know there's a lot of drivers that, the Japanese version, the Paldea Evolved version, absolute fire cards, gets Magikarp on the list. The other thing that I called out, remember I talked a minute ago about how there were fewer trainers up on that top graded individual card list? Well, guess what? Now there's only one trainer on the most graded subjects list, right? Like we saw Lily on there. We've seen a bunch of different trainers on here, but now the only one who's on here is Marnie. But good for Marnie because not only is she in there, she's in the top 6, which is really cool. The other thing that I wanted to call out is we've seen Giratina start to fall down the list. It is one spot away from getting knocked off. Now, when we started to watch it climb on the list, the price was growing up. Now that we're starting to see it come down, I don't know if there's going to be any kind of price regression, but I will tell you this. I have a video coming out on Sunday where I'm going to be looking at all the Sword and Shield prices and how they performed over the last month, and it is a bloodbath everywhere. So I don't think we can pinpoint any singular card making any crazy movements from that perspective, but I will say it's interesting to watch these names come up the list and subsequently come down the list as they come in and out of favor. Now, the other thing here is the gem rates by era, and I take this with a grain of salt, but I just think it's really cool because everybody's always out there talking about PSA gives easy 10s or Beckett gives easy 9.5s or CGC is an easy 10, all that stuff. And this just puts some math to it, and you know, the numbers fluctuate, right? When I look at it now, PSA and Beckett's TCG from the 2020 era, it increased by 10% month over month. Well, probably what happened was, you know, we had some new sets came out, everybody was flooding them over to PSA and Beckett they send in hopes of getting a 10, right? They want that black label. So I think a lot of people send the very best cards that they can to Beckett. So I expect Beckett's 9.5 gem rate to be higher because if you think that card is perfect and it falls just a little short, you should feel really darn good that's going to get a 9.5. But it's interesting to watch this. And then CGC again, last month, CGC's 2020 gem rate was at like 34% and now it's at almost 70%. So again, cool data to look at, not really buying into it. You know I like to look at my trends. You know that I like to, you know, plot it out over time, and I can't really find a good pattern here, but I will keep looking at it and I will keep talking about it because I think this is just a really cool thing for us to look at. Now, when I talk about the overall strength of the hobby, I alluded to this at the beginning of the video. I talked about how, listen, prices will go up, prices will go down, but what I want is I want more people in the hobby. I want more people collecting. Pokemon's printing more cards, that's fine. I want more people to buy them. I want more people to be collecting them in the future than is collecting today. Like, that's how your collection is going to be worth more money. And this graph right here totally epitomizes exactly what I'm looking for. If you were to trend line this out, you wouldn't find a more beautiful upward and the right trend line. Now, there are some things that I will say is obviously we all know that PSA opened up a grading card facility in Japan, so we have seen an influx of all of these Japanese cards. Now, I don't think that it's just solely driven by that, and at the end of the day, I thought about it, I'm like, well, who cares? Like, who cares what's getting graded or where it's getting graded? At the end of the day, all I care about is Pokemon and the graders and the people collecting it continue to grow, and this graph absolutely shows you that the number of TCG cards graded by month at PSA has been growing like hotcakes here, and it is really, really cool to say. And if you just want to look at it from a number of cards graded perspective, it is really hard to argue that TCG is in a better spot now than it's ever been in before, which is really exciting for all of us. Now, I always end with this slide because I think it's really cool for us to just talk about a really strong, really robust collecting space in general. Cardboard collecting is good for all of us. I want those baseball, basketball, football numbers to come up. I want people to be feverish about buying any kind of pack, about buying any kind of product. Like, just cardboard collecting in general is great for all of us. So when we look at this, PSA was flat overall month over month, and I will say this, for me at least, it seems like there's a little bit of a backlog at PSA. On 6/30, I sent through a batch of cards and it has only gotten to stage 6, and here we are, I don't know, 3+ months into it, right? Like 3 months and a week into it, and it still hasn't made its way back to me, which is fine. On 7/27, I sent another batch through and it's at stage 4. On 8/30, I sent another batch through, it's at stage 4. I send about a batch every single month, but it is interesting because I will tell you this is the longest I've had to wait to get any of my cards back to me. Not a bad thing, not a good thing, it's just a thing, right? So I think that's very interesting to call out. PSA is seeing record volume. You know, for me at least, it seems like it's slowing down a little bit. but it's hard to argue the strength of PSA overall as a whole. Now, this is the other thing that I wanted to say too. As I said earlier, you know, the Japanese grading volume is certainly supporting some strong TCG numbers, but I certainly don't think that that is the only thing that is driving this. Now, listen, everybody, if you enjoyed this type of content, hey, and you haven't hit the subscribe button yet, hit that subscribe button. We have a ton of fun on this channel. If you like what you saw, give us a thumbs up. Questions or comments, drop them down below. And as always, I hope you all have an epic one. Thanks, everybody. Bye.